first and foremost, we have an effective date of April 1st. So that's when you start counting how to quantify the amount of payments made for paid sick leave or family leave, and quantifying those costs against those maximums that are described in the Act, which are for people who are self-quarantining or are sick themselves. Again, it's $511 per day, or the maximum that they're getting paid per day, for up to 10 days for a maximum of $5,110. So that would be the credit for the people who are they themselves sick or are quarantining themselves and are unable to work. For the people who are caring for others, including dependents, or it could be family members, or in many cases it's going to be caring for children and are unable to come to work and are receiving those paid sick leave amounts, then that credit maximum is $200 per day for 10 days for a total of $2,000 per person. So these are in effect going to be the bulk of the credits that are going to be able to utilize to help you save and pay for these outflows. And I mentioned earlier, the mechanism or how we do that is there's an opportunity to realize these savings in real time, so to speak, by remitting less Social Security tax to the government. Now, in our experience in talking with our clients, this isn't always something that's very easy to do. And in fact, when we are helping clients claim payroll credits, we often find that they're remitting so often, and they may be working with a payroll provider, that it's unable to shut that off very quickly. So there is the option to claim the payroll credits as defined by these maximums against your payroll tax liability, which is reconciled quarterly. So that quarterly reconciliation is a payroll tax return, commonly reported on Form 941. And in that form, you'll demonstrate your total liability that you're owed to the government, and also how much you've been remitting in that quarter. And typically, especially when you're using a payroll provider, those two line items will net out. So you typically show no balance due. Now, in this situation where you have a payroll credit, you can demonstrate on that form that you've overpaid your Social Security tax and you're due a refund. Now, that's the opportunity where you get a check back from the government. Now, that being said, in our experience, that's a very lengthy process. So say starting in Q1 or starting in April 1st, you have some people who are receiving paid sick leave, and you quantify how much credit you're due. If you're unable to stop the remittance of payroll tax, then you seek to go ahead and reconcile that on your payroll tax return, which in Q2 is actually due in July. So that's where you would report it in July. And on that payroll tax return, you would showcase that you are refund due, and the government would have to process that payroll tax return and also process a check to cut back to you. Now that becomes a lengthy process, and it can be very, it takes, in our experience right now, it takes 2 to 3 months to receive that check. So if you have the opportunity to withhold your remittance or withhold your deposits in the amount of credit that you're expected to receive, then you can experience that cash savings in a more timely fashion.
Let me just, let me just add here that you want to be very careful to track all of these leaves diligently. And one with notice to the employee, but while we're talking about the tax credit component, the ability to do that is going to be much more efficient if you can track those leaves in your payroll system by adding a payroll code for both the sick leave and the emergency family leave. So I highly recommend that. And I know that payroll companies are working diligently to also help support the submittance process for them in an automated way. So that's in motion. But do look at your own ability to create a code for both categories of leave.
Jill, that's a great point, and I see some questions popping up around documentation and what are the requirements. And documentation in that real-time setting by using job codes is the best possible documentation. Right now, we're expecting to see more guidance. Of course, this is all brand new. We're expecting to see regulations put forth, and also we expect to see a simplification of the forms involved in claiming these credits. So adding a line item that's discrete for here's my computed payroll tax credit, and the attempt to make this processing more simple. We do expect those things to happen. We also expect payroll providers to react and be able to assist with claiming the credits as well. But in the interim, we have, as Jill mentioned, the opportunity, if you can set up those project codes, those would be the most useful.
Thanks, guys. So, Edward, I want to go a little bit deeper into some of the practical matters with regard to people's cash position and the SBA programs. I'm going to presume that not everyone knows how to find the data and how to leverage this. We talked a little bit about cash flow forecasting, and I think that would probably lead nicely into all of this is going to pass. So as we work through the immediacy of these challenges, what are some of the things that people can be doing to look towards the sort of near term and further past future, as well as taking care of the immediate needs of the business?
Thanks, Terry. The application for the SBA loans is going to be on their website. And to be honest with you, I expect that to be the simple part. If you have an existing SBA relationship, you're going to call your lender and have that conversation. To get to Terry's point, what you need to be able to do is understand and communicate what your losses have been and what your future exposure is, or what you anticipate it to be. And so I'm sure that many of you out there prepare a rolling cash forecast for your business, and you're diligent about following up on it and making sure that it's an accurate tool. To the extent that you don't, that forecast really serves as your way of communicating your business's story to lenders and investors and any other stakeholder in the business that's out there. So if you haven't done that, it's really important that you tackle that issue. And from our perspective, it's internal data and external objectivity. So if you have an advisory board, then you guys prepare that cash flow forecast and you utilize your advisory board to vet it and make sure that you haven't missed anything and you are accurately presenting what you think the business is going to do. That will be vital to you through this critical process. And then, as Terry says, we are all going to come out of this thing. And that becomes a very important tool as you seek to regrow your businesses. It is a value really no matter what the circumstances are.
Yeah, and there are certainly non-bank options out there for some companies, and so being able to evidence yourself in such a manner will be critical. And Edward, I think we have chatted on the Q&A line about this, but maybe go back to one quick tactical thing about the SBA program. So there's been a couple of questions around the 2.5 time payroll function. Go back on that if you can. And one of the questions was aggregate payroll as you might file in a tax versus just the salary of a person or people. So maybe go through some of that language if you don't mind.
The language as it currently exists, Terry, is that the maximum loan amount would be the lesser of $10 million or 2.5 months of average total monthly payroll costs for the 1 year period prior to the loan date. So you're able to look back a year, you calculate the average monthly payroll, and then you take 2.5 times that. I believe that that is going to necessarily be a number which is reported and supportable by the business owner, and that may come through ADP records or some other type of business-related metric.
Yep, thank you. And Jill, another interesting question about qualifying and the 500 employee threshold. So there's been a number of questions about where these people are and where they are across legal entities and the structure of the company. So is our presumption U.S. employees of any kind, including if it's a multinational, these are U.S. employees?
You know, honestly, I have to leave that one for the attorneys. I don't have a lot of insight into where those lines are drawn.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Edward.
I was just going to throw out an additional point, kind of a follow-up to my question of Andre and Jill about franchise or private equity ownership. The current expectation for the SBA is that private equity ownership will count towards the 500 employee cutoff. So they will be deemed associated entities if there is single ownership. In the case of franchise organizations, it does appear that there is going to be some discretion applied by the SBA in this interpretation, and so that it will not be the case that all of those entities are aggregated and that individual franchisors or franchisees rather will be determined to be separate businesses and qualify under the cutoff of 500 employees.